hey, I've got a problem with cylinder number 7. Get it? Right. So how does it do this? Well, it's based on 3,200 crankshaft revolutions. Okay? Now, notice I didn't say 3,200 RPM because it's 3,200 revolutions, of which half of that is actually a firing event. Get it? It takes 2 full turns of the crankshaft to fire all the cylinders. So if we look at this, half of this number is actually, firing events. Make sense? Anyways, so it looks at these and it says it puts them in 16. There's that number 16 again. Remember the last presentation I gave you? 16 again. It has to do with computer architecture. Anyways, we're looking at 200 revolution samples, and it looks at these and it says, oh, I had 198 of 200 fail. This is a problem. Now, once it gets to the end of this 3,200 revolution cycle, it discards these tests and then it starts again. Get it? So it throws them out and it starts again. It's a new world every 3,200 crankshaft revolutions. Anyways, all right. So it'll flash the mill on that 200 RPM cycle and then come on steady. First DTC on a first trip within 200 to 1,000 revolutions of the engine, it'll trip very, very quickly on a cat damaging one. On the threshold, and the threshold varies by speed and load. Asterisk on that. I'll get to that in a second. Come on. All right. So this one is more severe, only because it has 18 out of 200, so that's a much smaller sample, but it's happening over more of the different cells. Get it? So this is worse. Even though this number 18 out of 200 fail, even though the number is smaller, this is considered worse for the emissions. It's not damaging the cat, but it's damaging the emissions. All right. So same 3,200 R sample, same 16 samples. And if it's inconsistent, the time to set it could be much longer than a cat damaging misfire. This is why it goes to a type B. It opens this up more so that the computer can watch it over a longer period of time, trying to decide if A, there's anything it can do about it, and B, to alert the driver. But it still must fail 1,000 RPM 5 of the 200 test samples. Okay? Because 5 of the 200 RP are test samples. It must fail within 1,000 of those RPM over the 3,200 revolution cycle. If that makes any sense. Anyways. First trip earns the DTC, and the second consecutive trip under the same speed and load and coolant temp trips the trigger and turns on the light. Bloop. Okay. Here's a big chart. And remember I was talking about statistically weighted moving averages? They had these as well. Okay? So there's certain places where it's easier for the computer to set a misfire code than other places. You get it? I mean, we start getting way up in RPM, it gets harder for it to set the misfire code. We get way down in RPM and no load, again, it makes it harder to set the misfire code. Get it? I mean, if we look down here, under little to no load, there's no place for the diagnostic to be weighted. There is no codes down here. Get it? Anyways. All right. We have gone to, with our tier 2, which started at about 04 and started about 02, and there was a couple of stragglers and companies that didn't manage to get to the full tier 2 mandates right away. So some of those guys went till about 2006. So these monitors, we had, there you go. So way back in the beginning, they were having a hard time managing these misfires, and they were showing up at higher RPMs. So they actually got this what's called a misfire relief, where the government said, it's okay, you don't have to monitor misfires up above a certain RPM. So they didn't. And then when Tier 2 came along, we went to a full range misfire detection. So this is actually where you start looking at some of these cars, and they actually dropped the red line on some of them. They removed some of the higher RPMs in the computer, just cut out on you. It's like a governor, would limit the RPMs because they couldn't manage to get the misfires to go away at very high RPMs. So they just limited the misfire, and that's one of the ways they did it. So you see all of a sudden, cars coming through where last year it had a 7,000 RPM limit, and now it's 5,800. We okay? And that's the reason why. Anyways. All right, so here's the other thing that we look at. And this is ABS wheel speed sensors come into play in this. And if we look at, actually this is crankshaft. Hang on. This is crankshaft. And as you can see, especially if we have a manual transmission. Automatics, not so much. There's some viscous coupling in the clutch packs and in the torque converter. Although when we're running a locked up torque converter in overdrive, that's a pretty solid connection all the way through the crankshaft. So what we can get is, we get this rough road misfire thing. You get it? Because its impact on the drive wheels is changing the speed of the crankshaft just from hitting potholes or rocks or armadillos, whatever. But, it changes the RPM speed. So, they actually look at this and it'll go into like a rough road detection. And it does this by monitoring ABS wheel speed. Okay? It sees a sudden change in speed on the right front and then the right rear. It sees a sudden change, and it's like, boom, boom. It's the computer, the ABS computer is monitoring this, and it sends a text message. Hey, dude, over to the PCM. Hey, dude, I think we're on a rough road. I know. LOL. We okay? To let it know, and it'll suspend misfires during this. We okay? So this is where ABS wheel speed sensors have product in misfires. Anyways, all right, software filters it out, uses ABS wheel speed sensors, rough road ABS class 2's message to the PCM. PCM suspends any tests. Can we get other stuff that's upsetting the misfire? Yeah, I've had water pumps, bad bearings and water pumps throw a misfire code. I've had bad belts throw a misfire code. Anything that can impact the RPM speed of the crankshaft, even in a small way, can affect a flagged misfire. So if I think it's maybe an accessory belt, I'll take the accessory belt off, run it again to see if I still got it. I'll go into mode 6, and I'm going to show you mode 6 when we get into the lab on how to directly monitor misfires. We're going to be actually looking at misfires under mode 6. More on this and all that. Vehicles with the automatic trans will actually disengage the lock-up torque converter to try to decouple it to see if the misfires go away. And, okay, there we go. So we have what's listed as current misfires, and we can look at history misfires. So I can look over a period of time, like long-term fuel trim. I can look at this number and see if I have a problem. I can look at the current ones, but remember, most of these current ones will, throw out any test after 3,200 revolutions of the engine. So, you may not see a lot pop up in here, but where they'll be popping up is in the history misfires, if you can get to it. Not all cars allow you to get to this number, but a lot of them do. So if we look at this particular car, I got 0 on cylinder 4, 0 on cylinder 5, 94 on cylinder 6, and 1,356 on cylinder number 1. That seems like a problem to me. Okay? But, do we have a problem with all the cylinders? Well, No, and it is common to get some misfires in history, like popping up every once in a while here and there. And usually this is cleared out with the key. Okay? So you turn the key off, it dumps all this memory. Anyways, so what's it good for? Well, it can be used for diagnosis. It won't tell you why the cylinder misfired, but it can point you in the right direction, and allow you to narrow your focus down.